I want you to close your eyes and think back to the year 2018. Some ways, feels like a long way away.
That was the year that Battle for Azeroth came out.
But objectively, it wasn't. It was 6 short years. And yet, in those 6 short years, one of the most sweeping social revolutions in the United States has happened beneath our feet, and we are only just starting to grapple with it. That is the mass legalization and normalization of online sports gambling. The mass legalization and normalization of sports gambling has the potential to rival the opioid epidemic in the United States. Its destruction of the American family.
Well, it seems like it's killing more people, too. Yeah, I feel like it's probably killing more people than opioids. Well, I mean, if people kill themselves, but I mean, it's at the end of the day, same thing.
Unit. And yet today, almost all lawmakers are lockstep in their support of it. The roots of online sports gambling boom in the United States trace back to a 2018 Supreme Court decision after a petition was filed by the state of New Jersey challenging something known as the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, or PASPA. PASPA passed in 1992, effectively restricted all legal sports gambling action to the state of Nevada. And now this is stuck in New Jersey's craw in 2009. Especially after the Great Recession. They needed a way to bail out Atlantic City casinos. So on their behalf, they brought the suit against the law, where it would be eventually resolved in their favor in 2018. Now, in the 9 years where New Jersey brought the suit against PASPA, something important also happened. The absolute explosion of something called daily fantasy sports. Daily fantasy sports was effectively a loophole.
It's a way for you to lose your money every day,
allowing people to place wagers on fantasy sports leagues and daily payouts, something that many Americans were already doing in their spare time. It aligned perfectly with the rise of the smartphone.
It's a daily quest that causes you to lose $30.
Companies like DraftKings and FanDuel began their entry into the market under this guise. So it was at this time where the roots of the epidemic were laid. Wagers were already being placed in mass by millions of Americans, and the normalization of gambling on the phone was planted. Perhaps most importantly, though, these companies began to hone their strategies, which include insane levels of marketing focused on one specific message. It's a game of skill, and you can hit it big. Now, in a sense, they are correct, but there's a lot.
You can be really good at sports betting, but this is the thing, is that it's capitalizing on people thinking that they're smart. That's what it is. Yeah, you can be a winner if you're smart.
More subtext removed, which I will return to later.
Sure.
Suffice to say this, they were already tanned, rested, and ready for the Supreme Court decision, which opened the floodgates. On May 14th, 2018, the Supreme Court struck down PASPA. Within a month, the state of Delaware began accepting single-game wagers, which would be seen as tame today. By the end of the month, 7 states had legalized sports gambling, and by today, as I speak, 39 states, including the District of Columbia, have it legalized. Now, it's important to note,
Biden's got to
say legalized, it doesn't mean that it's a free-for-all. What it really means is that a few mega companies like DraftKings, FanDuel, PrizePicks, and others have effectively rolled up the legal sports betting market by getting separate states to grant them preferential licenses to run action in their state. This is important because the quasi...
It's crazy how big it is now. Sports betting, I feel like in the less than 10 years, like what he's saying, it's been like really 5 years. If I think about how much gambling was around 5 years ago, it was like 20% or 10% of what it is now. It's massive now.
Monopolistic way that sports gambling...
You can bet on the weather now?
Runs on a state-by-state basis means that it is not a fair marketplace. And 2, it means that their excesses and sins are multiplied to absolutely stupendous profit and fundamentally are altering the way that American sports leagues will operate for decades to come. So let's take some time to ruminate on gambling itself and the attitudes of the United States towards it over the years. It's fair to say the U.S. has undergone an extraordinary transition from effectively a nation of prudish Christians to much more secular libertarians in the span of just a few decades. This is evident in current social attitudes from everything on abortion, gay marriage, to marijuana, and now sports gambling. Gambling itself...
He brings up a really good point, is that one of the reasons why gambling was seen as much more negative back in the day is because people were more religious, and gambling is generally against a lot of religions. Yeah, it's a really good point.
was traditionally viewed as a sinful, backwards activity that was actively discouraged by the state for centuries. Now, the compromise that we got to was one that I actually think is quite sensible. People will always gamble. Let's not make it too easy. You can do it, but you have to go to a physical casino. There are governing bodies like the Nevada Gaming Commission, which make sure that these games are run fairly. And in general, that attitude was to confine it to as small places as possible that are accessible, who are committed, but who did not want to make it part of everyday life. Quite sensible, in my opinion. Should be applied to all vices. We understand they exist, but it shouldn't be too easy to indulge, from cigarettes to alcohol. And this has been an attitude in America now for decades.
And it shouldn't be too easy for kids to get involved. That's the other really big issue, is that like with sports betting and the amount of like influence that it has on sports, there's a lot of kids that see that now, and kids are thinking about gambling and betting at like 9 years old. That's the big issue. It's loot boxes, etc. Yeah, exactly, right? And so by the time the kid gets old enough to do it themselves, well, they've already been thinking about doing it for 10 years.
But then everything changed. And now all of a sudden, sports gambling is not just legal, but it's available everywhere. At the click of a button on your smartphone that's always in your pocket, to hundreds of millions of Americans. And the results are in. They're astonishing. Since 2018, U.S. customers have placed approximately $500 billion in bets at legal sports books. And
$500 billion. How can so many people be so stupid? How's that possible? I don't understand. Do you really have to ask? No, it's just crazy. How do you...
turning a nation that had rare access to sports gambling into the largest gambling marketplace on earth.
Oh my God.
This has transformed the finances of everyday Americans in a way that has not happened in generations. My friend Charles Lehman summed up 3 separate large-scale studies. The top-line findings are this. For every $1 waged on sports betting, household savings is depleted by $2.
Oh, jeez. What a surprise. Time to open myself a casino? I know, it's insane, isn't it? And here's another thing. It's that if you look at a lot of like esports, especially like with Counter-Strike, you have like the skin sales and everything. Basically, you have a lot of sports and types of entertainment that is now effectively subsidized by gambling. So you have an incentive now for tons of platforms and groups of people to totally be okay with this because it allows them to make a living. So you have like an entire ecosystem that's been created around gambling. So like basically these companies, what they're doing, well, like, okay, so back in the day, we used to like Aztecs, right? This is a pretty popular thing. Take a virgin, get at the top of the pyramid, stab them in the chest, cut their heart out, and maybe it'll rain, right? Good. And so what we're doing now is that we still do that, but we outsource the virgins to this casino, and it happens in like an abstract sense. And we're outsourcing even the cutting. They cut their own hearts out now. They kill themselves. And so what you have is you have these platforms that are effectively making human sacrifices to gambling for them to make money. And so they're not going to complain about it. They're not going to say it's bad because that's their fucking meal ticket. That's how they exist. And so the gambling sites aren't going to say it's bad because they're fucking billionaires. And that's how it is. That's the way it is. That's life. People are desperate. I guess so. Blood for the blood god.
Legalized online gambling has increased the risk of household bankruptcy in a state by 25 to 30%. And worst of all, legalized sports gambling has massively increased the rates of domestic violence, specifically against spouses of those who lose.
I wonder why.
Unsurprisingly, all of these effects are felt by the most economically precarious households, and the financial
Well, it makes sense that people that are poor are going to gamble because, like, again, if you're the kind of person that gambles, you're probably, I'm going to be honest, you're probably a fucking moron. And so if you're a fucking moron, there's probably going to be a higher chance that you don't have any fucking money because you're too dumb to figure out, you're too dumb to have a skill that people want to pay you to use. Yeah, there's a lot of people that get addicted to gambling. They're smart people, right? Of course it happens. But there's a lot of people that get addicted to gambling and are stupid. That's it. It's called an idiot tax for a reason. Yep, exactly.
Are concentrated amongst young men. Fair to say it's been a disaster. So let's go through the arguments.
Another reason why young men turn to gambling is because they have no future that they can look forward to in their life, and they don't think that they can have any sort of, like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. So the best thing that they can hope for is winning like an 11-way parlay with like the SpaceX rocket blowing up, Donald Trump turning into a dragon, and, the U.S. nuking Mexico. Oh, and then also Kevin Hart comes on the basketball field or a basketball court, and he shoots a half-court shot, and he wins, and he gets it in there. Yeah, so if all those things happen, this person becomes a billionaire.
Even though all of this is really bad, we should overlook it. First is
and then Kanye becomes president.
Philosophical argument.
We discover that unicorns are real. This is the most cursed 11-way parlay of all time, and it will result in becoming a trillionaire.
This is what living in a free society looks like.
Yes.
That just because some people can't control themselves, we shouldn't ruin the fun for everyone.
Well, they're free to kill themselves, and they do.
I understand that argument. I agree with it partially. But I would say this. The U.S. has recognized always that we can respect freedom of choice while also recognizing that when something is bad and trying to reduce said behavior for the societal benefit of all citizens, we should. We have arrived at this with a sensible attitude, for example, towards cigarettes. We know cigarettes are bad, so we tax them. We restrict their place of sale.
The main problem with sports betting is the fact that it's hand in hand with things that are tailored towards minors. So, like, you're effectively grooming underage people. This is the reason why it's very bad to have it in sports. It's because kids pay attention to sports. And so, like, kids know what stake is. They know all of this stuff. If it was only for adults, I would be much more okay with it. But it's not relegated to adult spaces. And I also want to say that I'm completely consistent with this. I wish that there were no commercials for alcohol as well. I don't think that you should be allowed to run a commercial for alcohol or cigarettes in any place where an underage person could be.
We don't allow cigarette companies to advertise on television. We have developed good social norms.
Alcohol is completely normalized.
To smoke. Nonetheless, something like 20% of Americans still smoke, but it's down from a record of like 40 or 50% decades ago, and new uptake in smoking continues to reduce. Now, compare cigarettes to online gambling. DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, Prize Picks are allowed to flood the airwaves with a single message. All you have to do is use your skill and your genius, and you can become a winner.
And this is also another thing where a lot of companies you're seeing are capitalizing on the narcissism that social media creates, and they're using it against people. They're telling people you are special, you are smart, you're so smart, and you're so special that you're able to do this and you're going to become a millionaire. That's what happens. And so, like, if you can convince a stupid person that they're smart, they'll give you all their money. And that's exactly what happens here.
We'll explain soon how this...
The American dream isn't to become a millionaire. It's to become a millionaire and think that you earned it.
This is a complete lie. But second is this, and what I want people to understand. It is impossible for these companies to run a fair operation that does not rely on exploiting gambling addicts and to still make a profit. A new study by the Southern...
That's true with any... All gambling is a net negative for society. There is never a point where gambling will improve the lives of anyone. Actually, that's not true. Some people do win. But if you look at a net effect, gambling will always be a negative for society.
This university tracked 700,000 online sports bettors for 5 years.
That's a lot.
They found less than 5% of users ever withdrew.
What a bunch of fucking idiots. The rest were losers. 3% of the losers... Remember when I said losers lose? Here we are. It's a fucking study. Losers lose so much, they made up for 50% of the revenue. 3% of the losers... Look, read this, guys. 3% of the losers made up for 50% of the revenue. That's 1 minus 700,000. Think about how many average people that counts for. That's a lot. The whales? Yep, that's right. And they're getting harpooned.
profit. The remainder of the users either broke even or lost money, covering the winnings of those 5. But worst is this. 3% of all bettors who lost the most accounted for 50% total revenue
Those
of
are the
these
human
online sports betting
sacrifices.
companies. In other words, less than 5% of people actually realized any profit. The rest were losers, and the big losers lost so much they made up 50% of total
mega
revenue.
losers.
Now couple this with the dirty secret of online sports betting. If you are one of the less than 5% who win, you're lucky if you're allowed to gamble for even a few months on these apps.
Yeah, because they don't want winners. Why would they want somebody who's going to cause them to lose money?
You start to win consistently, these gambling companies are fully within their rights to limit your bet size to amounts to less than $10 or even $1. Meaning that if you're any good, they are allowed to restrict your action and their potential exposure.
Yeah, if you lose your money. If you win, you can't play.
So this is an outrageously good business, isn't it? You can promise people they can get rich. If they actually do, you cut them off. Then you employ all company resources towards extracting as much as humanly possible from gambling addicts to make up 50% of your revenue. In other words, if these gambling companies were forced to allow fair play and then follow their own guidelines around restrictions.
You know what they should do is they should have maybe a fan cam for the bottom 3% of people. That they should have a fan cam for the bottom 3% of people that are losing 50% of the money, and maybe the people will get extra bets or extra wagers by having it on, and then with the people that are losing the most money, you can have people that bet on when that person is going to kill themselves, and that way it could be a meta level thing where it's a form of virtual cannibalism. I think that'd be a really good idea. Because people would watch it, and I'd see somebody, people would be trying to get them to the breaking point as much as possible, right? Oh, keep going, bro. You've almost got it. That'd be an amazing movie. Oh, we don't have to wait for a movie. It'll probably just happen in a few years. Said this before. I know. What can I say? I'm a creative guy.
Restricting addicts, something they are legally required to do, they would go bankrupt, and this entire farce would fall apart. Take the story of a New Jersey man, known to us as Mdalo 1990. In 2020, this man never placed a bet in his life.
He's my age.
By 2024, he had lost approximately $1 million, despite making an income of $175,000 per year.
So he lost all his money. What a surprise. This happens? That's crazy. Wow.
Drained his wife's investments. He maxed out their credit cards. He drained his young children's savings accounts and sold the gifts that they were given for Christmas and their baptisms.
That's right.
Now, it's really easy to say, yeah, it's his fault. Screw him.
It is.
But according to his wife's lawsuit, this user was contacted on a daily basis by DraftKings VIP hosts. They facilitated his access to gambling products despite knowing it was impossible for him to be able to support the amount of money that he was placing on wagers with his W-2 income. Their own policies, as dictated by the state, require them to have gamblers placing large sums prove their ability to furnish funds by providing them a W-2 statement or bank statements. According to his wife, quote, they knew he would not be able to continue to gamble large sums of money if they required verification. And they also knew the source of the money was, quote, illegitimate. A modest amount of due diligence required by their own policies would have shown he did not have the ability to wager.
Based off of those rules, I can't see how she's wrong. You're responsible for your own actions? Okay, so I agree with you, but we're not talking about your own actions. We're not talking about ethics. There's a law. If they're not following the law and there's a regulation, then they're wrong. That's the way it works. There's a policy. You have to follow the policy. Did they follow the policy? No. Okay, then they're wrong.
Literally 4 times his literal W-2 salary. Throughout this entire time, again, on a daily basis, DraftKings threw so-called free promotions at him.
Right.
Whiskey glasses, VIP tickets, and more. Now, they do not do this out of the goodness of their heart. As I said earlier, people like this man constitute only 3% of gamblers, but make up 50% of
That's
revenue.
right.
In fact, some people have caught on. A new number of pro sports bettors are mimicking the behavior of people like Mdalo1990. They log into their accounts in the middle of the night to make it seem like they cannot sleep without checking their bets. Why? Because it flags to the algorithm that they are gambling addicts. It means that the company is more likely to shower you with so-called free promotional money and to continue your addiction chain.
Oh, man. Bro, people are getting farmed by an algorithm like that. That's nuts. We don't need Skynet to kill people. Skynet has people kill themselves.
This is fundamentally different than alcohol or cigarette companies. Cigarette companies are not allowed to advertise, period, let alone literally sponsor major sporting events. Furthermore, cigarette companies are not allowed to identify their so-called super smokers and shower them in free and addictive cigarettes to encourage their addiction. Same with alcohol companies or any other vice. In this case, the statistics show us that the profit margins and the very business model of these companies rely on so-called problem gamblers to prop up the revenue of the entire company.
Well, of course, those are the human sacrifices that bring in the rain. No, that's absolutely true. The reason why these things exist is because other people are losing money. That's the way it works. Yeah, I mean, obviously, right? But it works. It does. It does work. That's why they keep doing it. It's exactly like gacha games. No. So gacha games, I've covered this before, so I don't want to waste too much time on it. But gacha games are fundamentally different than for money gambling, because in gacha games, you can't chase losses. The way that a lot of people end up getting into gambling debt and end up ruining their lives is they get involved in chasing losses. So what I mean by that is that every dollar you spend on Honkai Star Rail, you know that there's never a chance of you becoming a millionaire by rolling for Kafka. You will never get Acheron to a level that will cause you to win $1 million. That cannot happen in the game. The game does not have that function. So in a game that you can't actually like chase losses, the gambling function is not as strong. Now, if you want to say gacha is gambling, you fundamentally are right. But for money gambling and chasing losses gambling is infinitely more corrosive than gacha is. But that doesn't mean that gacha is good.
Now let me take it even a step further, because now imagine if cigarette companies had a super addictive special cigarette, and that cigarette was the one that they are marketing the most, pushing and making the most money on.
Super cigarettes.
That is the case of online sportsbooks, who are pushing a particular type of bet called a parlay bet. Most of you probably know what it is, but it's simple. A parlay bet is a contingent bet, where several discrete events have to happen for you to win. Parlay bets, unsurprisingly, have the biggest payouts. And unsurprisingly, they have the biggest loss rate for gambling.
Well, the reason why parlays work well is because people don't fundamentally understand mathematical probability. And so this is another example I was giving you about how, because people are so stupid and they can't process, there are a lot of people, there are a surprising amount of people that are unable to process hypothetical or theoretical situations. And they can only think about the here and now. And so those people can never do risk or like loss analysis because their brain just isn't programmed for it. Like, you can want your Game Boy Advance to play Baldur's Gate 3 all you want. It's not going to happen.
Why? Because they're unlikely. And yet, this exact bet, the parlay bet, is the one most pushed, most marketed, and most used by online sports.
No, it actually is. A lot of people, this is one thing that a lot of people don't really like to admit, but that IQ is not, it's not completely malleable. There are some people that are born with more talent points than others, and there are some people that are just born stupid. Now, they could become less stupid, but they're never going to be smart. They're always going to be stupid. And that's it. I mean, here's what's the logic here? Like, every other animal in the entire history of animals has like a cap on what it can be. Humans are the exact same thing. It's sad but true. Yeah, so I know it's an uncomfortable truth, but it is a reality. Some people are never going to be able to understand like abstract concepts. They're never going to have any ability to like, you know, have like any sort of like meta level cognitive thought. It's just not going to happen. Some people are born with low int builds. Yeah, and it doesn't matter how much you put them in school. They're just never going to learn it or understand it at all. That's it. Sorry.
Bettors. The largest online sportsbook in the United States, FanDuel, has amassed 46% market share in the United States, specifically by marketing massively profitable single-game parlay bets, which are gigantically profitable for the company.
Of course.
We don't have exact data. We do know this from the state of Illinois. 60% of all wagers in the state wagered online are parlay bets. We also know that the online sportsbook knows...
I'm going to ask you guys a question. If you asked the average parlay Andy what 8 times 8 is, what percentage of them would get it right? .4%. You guys have no idea how bad people's math skills are. It is astonishing. It's scary, even.
That they will win with such regularity, they build it into their profit forecast before the customers even officially lose.
Wait a minute, what?
Parlay bets, which are gigantically profitable for the company. We don't have exact data. We do know this from the state of Illinois. 60% of all wagers in the state wagered online are parlay bets. We also know that the online sportsbook know that they will win with such regularity, they build it into their profit forecast before the customers even officially lose.
Oh my God. Bro, they call the game before it even starts. Oh my God. I need to make a gambling website. This is amazing. They understand probabilities. I guarantee you that you have people that are believing that things that are outside of the the second or third statistic deviation, standard deviation, are like a 50-50. Right? It's like 99.7% unlikely. Yeah, I mean, it either happens. I feel like there's like a 20% chance this is going to go down.
And they remain the single most profitable bet to the company. So again, bringing it back to a cigarette comparison, you target the most addicted, and you sell them the worst thing for them. The system is built on a simple premise. Ban winners, milk losers for all they're worth. All of you who are placing small wagers for fun is great. But the thing is, it's only enabled by crippling addicts. Already, Gamblers Anonymous is reporting massive spikes in the number of young bettors calling their hotline, coming to their meetings. Some children as young as 14 have found their way.
14? I thought it'd be like 11. 14? No, it's got to be younger than that.
To bet their parents' phones are full addicts. This will only continue.
Well, you think about it, like you're a little kid, you grew up watching Coco Melon, you start eating Lunchleys, and maybe you eat Lunchables that have lead in them. You do that for a few years. Then probably by age 9 or 10, you finally learn how to spell your own name. A year later, you go to middle school and your friend brings Galaxy Gas to class. And then afterwards, you forget how to spell your name again. A couple years after that, now you're doing drugs already, and you're betting on fucking your mom's account for sports betting. You're doing like a 5-way parlay that has to do with like another like fucking country. Yeah, you got yeah, dude, these kids are getting fucking destroyed.
Brings me back to the comparison I made.
It's the American dream,
It took nearly a decade to reckon with Purdue Pharma and the OxyContin crisis. It created an entire generation of previously not known heroin addicts. But the signs a few years were all there. And now we've unleashed an addiction with one of the highest rates of people taking their own lives and made it easily accessible to hundreds of millions of Americans. If anything, this trend is accelerating. Literally just a few days ago, the state of Missouri legalized sports gambling. Now
it's going to become much more popular. Yeah, of course it will be, because it makes a lot of money. And it will never, here's the funny thing about sports betting, is that it will never stop making money. There's never going to be a point where the society and people at large think to themselves, wait a minute. Wait a minute. The probability of this it's never going to happen.
40th state to do so. And so, when people come back to this in a decade, and we have millions of gambling addicts, high rates of domestic violence, alcoholism, and we need to figure out what to do, let me offer this modest proposal. The solution is staring us all in the face. More of what we used to do. PASPA was correct about one thing. It is not fair that Nevada is the only monopoly on sports gambling. So instead, adopt a model what the UK used to have. Sports betting is legal and available in person at parlors, which are widely accessible. People can access it, but it requires physically having to go to a location with cash. This introduces the same level of friction that all other vices are governed by in the US. Second, betting organizations must be subject to fairness rules. If they advertise anyone can win, then everyone must be allowed to win. They cannot be allowed to limit sharp sports bettors and must have a truly free market.
Well, then they'd run out of money if too many people win. And if they run out of money, then that would be terrible. Like, can you imagine if you gamble and then you lose? You can't let the casino lose. That would be terrible. What do you mean?
3, we must have heavy oversight on the ongoing fusion between professional sports and gambling companies.
Yeah.
You can call this nanny state intervention if you want, but here's the truth. The NFL, the National Football League itself, it only exists because of multiple acts of Congress and preferential treatment from the U.S. government. Sports and the NFL are important to the American character. Gambling corruption scandals are already...
Well, of course they're important. That's why the gambling companies are trying to attach themselves to it. Like, that's why they want to do it. Like, make no mistake, if these gambling companies could find a way to get 8-year-olds to gamble on who's going to win in Dragon Ball Z, they would do it. Absolutely. Instantaneously, they would do it. Like, if 12-year-olds could bet on which Minecraft YouTuber gets canceled next, they would absolutely do it. That sounds like a good idea.
Already beginning to question the very integrity of the game itself. Leagues have become physically intertwined with multi-billion-dollar gambling behemoths is a recipe for corruption and disaster. So I will end with a warning that I gave many years
I don't think there's any corruption. I just think that it's bad.
Ago. Sometimes private industry can be just as much of a threat to your freedom and liberty as the government itself. And in this case, I think it is quite clear the damage gambling companies have wrought and will continue to do to America's families poses a direct threat to our country. I am clear-eyed. It will only get worse.
It will.
But I hope I could help all of you at least think about what I believe is going to be a major problem of our time. So what do you think, Crystal? Did I convince you?
Hey guys, obviously I had a lot of thoughts on what Sagar had to say there.
Bro.
So if you want to see my thoughts on this monologue and every other Sagar monologue, make sure you subscribe at breakingpoints.com.
This guy cooked. This was pretty much one fucking take. He just said, like, yeah, this is the way it is. Yeah, there's the video right there. Make sure to give it a like. That was really, really fucking good, man. And he absolutely cooked with that. 100%. So what's going to happen more is that, and the reason why gambling is so popular, there are a couple of reasons. Number one, a lack of education. People don't understand statistical probability, they don't understand mathematics, and they can't understand abstract concepts. Part of this is genetic with IQ, but there's another very, excuse me, there's another very big part of it that is just very simple. They don't understand, Jesus Christ. I don't know how I do this to myself like every day, where I'll drink the wrong type of fucking, like, my water will go down my throat where I'm supposed to breathe. Wrong hole again. Yeah, I feel like it happens like 2 or 3 times a week now. Anyway, no, I'm totally fine. I just, went down the wrong hole, basically. And so, anyway, let me think what I was going to say. Water, same thing had happened. But anyway, yeah, it's going to keep getting worse. And I think what's going to happen is that as it keeps getting worse, you're going to see more and more companies and more avenues of exploiting it. So you're going to see sports betting like this is already common, but it's going to become infinitely more common when we start seeing sports betting be common with video games. And so I think that as soon as sports betting becomes super common with video games, and then they're advertising it with like Fortnite matches and stuff, that's going to be the only chance that you're probably going to have to see any sort of regulation, because these games are basically designed for children, right? And even then, I don't think that it's going to happen. Basically, these companies have built an entire, their entire business model is built off of stupid people that don't understand math. And the problem is that a lot of people are stupid. A lot of people don't know math. And then there's the other thing, is that we live in a culture of such massive narcissism and self-centeredness that everybody thinks that they're the main character. Everybody thinks that they're the one that was special because their third grade teacher said they were gifted. And guess what happens? Well, you have those people. I'm special. I'm a winner. I can do it. And then they don't do it. And then they kill themselves because they wasted all their fucking money. So yeah,